Could you shut this door, please?
Good evening, and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Black Press USA. Tonight, the NNPA is going to embark on what promises to be a historic election coverage. Beginning tonight and every Tuesday and including election night, we will bring you the latest in the 2020 election, and we will have some of our very best talent, as well as elected officials and others, to talk about what most people are calling the most consequential election in U.S. history. Today, we have joining us from Houston, the Houston Forward Times, Jeffrey Boney, the great columnist there, and he's also a councilman. We also have from the great state of Ohio, Walter White of the Cincinnati Herald, and joining Walter from Cincinnati is Andrea Carter, also of the Cincinnati Herald. And then we go down south to another battleground state, Bobby Henry of the WESTSIDE Gazette. Bobby,
yes,
thanks for joining us. And also joining us right now is our president and CEO, Dr. Ben Chavis, who just got off an airplane from Indianapolis. Welcome, Dr. Chavis.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And
good evening.
Let's get out the vote.
Well, and also tonight, at any moment, we expected to be joined, speaking of Ohio, Congresswoman MARCIA Fudge, the former CBC chair and current representative from the great state of Ohio, to talk about all the issues. And guys and ladies, we can jump right in because there's so much to cover right now. Within the last half hour, White House spokesperson Stephen Miller, a top aide to President Trump, and actually the president's speechwriter, announced that he too has COVID-19. That makes at least 20 members of Trump's inner circle with the illness, with the virus, within the last week. Jeff, Bobby, Walter, you guys, what you make of this?
He's writing speeches. I hope he had one prepared for this.
Well, you know, we saw Dr. Chavis, the president, at Walter Reed Hospital, and come out and take a joyride, and in fact, endangering the Secret Service and others. Dr. Chavis, have you seen anything like this before?
No, but I have a concern. I don't want us to take our eye off the prize. The president is the chief diversionary agent. He's the chief illusion maker. He's the chief prevaricator. And what I want us to do is to focus on that as we have this call tonight in preparation for the 2020 election, COVID-19 has a disproportionate terrible effect having a terrible effect on the African American community. And I think that should be our focus. How we're going to get the vote out amidst the pandemic, how we're going to get the vote out amidst all the voter suppression that's going on in Texas, Florida, Ohio, and other states. So I think we should not overly respond to the president's tweet or to the president's tactics, because those are deliberately to deploy our attention away from what we need to be working on. Where Brother Boney is in Harris County, Texas, they are trying to only have one place, one box to drop the ballots off in. So I think that we need to stay real focused. And I'm so pleased. I'm proud of the Black press, Stacey. I'm proud of everyone on this call, because it's been our responsibility for 193 years since Freedom's Journal was first published to keep our eyes on what the real prize is, to keep our eyes on the quality of life in our community, to keep our eyes on not only the tactics that are being used to divert our attention, but also I've just come from Indiana, where it's a red state, but Indianapolis had Democrats. And I'm pleased to report to you that I see some coming together that transcend the partisan divide.
Well, Dr. Chavis, Dr. Chavis, to your point of keeping your eyes on the prize, we are joined by Congresswoman Marcia Fudge out of Ohio, who just today chaired a very important commission about the election. Congresswoman Fudge, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about that hearing today, and how did it all turn out?
Well, it was a great hearing. I mean, certainly we talked today about misinformation and the things we look to look out for this election, but it was just so interesting that every hearing we do is bipartisan. Not one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle got on the call because they don't want to hear about voter suppression. They don't want to hear about disenfranchising the formerly incarcerated. They don't want to hear about one ballot drop-off box in a county that has over 1 million people. They don't want to hear about any of it. But the call went extremely well. We had the Secretary of State from Colorado. We had a member of the Board of Elections here from Cleveland. We had the head of the Elections Commission in Washington, and Spencer Overton from the Joint Center. And we talked about all of the things that are confronting Black and brown people and poor people in this election. And we are just so really excited about the way it turned out. The information was outstanding. What it boils down to, though, no matter what we say and what we do, because voting has already begun, is we have to figure out how to vote no matter the obstacle, no matter how many roadblocks they put in our way. We have to find a way to go out and vote. And right now, those numbers are big all across the United States.
Yeah, the latest poll shows that Joe Biden enjoys now a 16 percentage point lead over the president. Guys, we got all journalists on this call. Please feel free. We have the pleasure of the Congresswoman only for a few moments this evening. So jump in, Jeff, Bobby, Walter. Jump in with any questions you might have for the Congresswoman, as well as, of course, Dr. Chavis. You please jump in.
I'm going to be quiet and listen.
Well, I just wanted to, first of all, kind of piggyback on
the Honorable Congresswoman Marcia Fudge. I think her leadership is so valuable. In fact, the whole 55 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. I'm so proud of our brothers and sisters who serve not only congressional districts, but who make a difference for all of Black America. So, Congresswoman Fudge, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Your continued leadership. I just want to let you know the Black press, we're working with you, with all the members of the CDC, to make sure that we keep our people woke, keep our people awake, and keep our people mobilized so we can have the largest voter turnout in America in history of.
Yeah, we're losing Dr. Chavis, unfortunately, but I want, Congresswoman Fudge, I want to throw it over to Jeffrey Boney of the Houston Forward Times. He wanted to jump in on the question there, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, first I wanted to kind of question Stacey, which was about what do we make of Trump and his COVID-19 fiasco and theatrics. Of course, I think he's using this as a show. There's many questions out there as to whether he truly even had COVID-19, but nonetheless, we know that it's stated that the president had it. Of course, the First Lady Melania Trump had it. His advisor Hope Hicks, the press secretary, and now we hear about Stephen Miller and so many others. And he's riding around and trying to get praise, and even I want to say had some words that he needed to be praised for beating COVID, and that's what leaders do. But I think that in the midst of all this, there's been so much attention taken away from the fact that his tax returns came out the way they were, with the $750 paid in taxes. Of course, with the whole white supremacy fiasco at the debate, and many other things that have been going on relative to this president. And then just today, he tweets out another one of his famous tweets that the Democrats weren't, quote, not negotiating in good faith, and he instructed Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to focus full time on confirming his Supreme Court nominee Amy Barrett versus trying to deal with the COVID-19 stimulus package that the Democrats have been trying to negotiate with the Republicans and the president on for months. So I guess, Congresswoman Fudge, I would like to ask you, what are your thoughts about the fact that the president has stalled these negotiations on COVID-19 and wants to still, though, focus on the Supreme Court nominee?
Let me say a couple of things. First off, before I get into this, let me thank NNPA. Let me tell you, members like us, most of the time, the only way we get our messages out is through you. So we appreciate what you do. And no matter what side of the aisle you are on, for the president to have pulled the stunt that he did the other day, it is indefensible, it is despicable, it is irresponsible to put not only people's lives at risk, but he's doing the same thing now with this bill. He's basically saying, I don't care what happens to people like you and me. All I care about is what I want to do, because the cost of that little stunt could probably have paid about 100 or 150 people another $600 a week for another month. He has decided that as much as he brags about his affinity for heroes, is what he calls them, he doesn't want to pay them. The sticking point on this bill is state and local government. He does not want to pay state and local government. Now, what do states and local governments pay? Police, fire, teachers, EMS, all the people he talks about, doctors, nurses, all the people on the front line. He could care less, because the only thing he wants to do, as you say, is to put in place a new Supreme Court justice for the sole reason, well, let me say there are two reasons. One is so that if this race is decided by a court, he will have stacked the deck. Secondly, the court is going to hear on November 10th, I believe the date is, the appeal to Obamacare. He wants to do away with Obamacare just because it has the name Obama in it. There is no other reason for it. He has no plan. He doesn't care to have a plan, but he wants to continue to make rich people richer, and he doesn't care about anyone else. He is, I think, the worst, in my opinion, the worst president in the history of this country, because the only thing he cares about is himself. And for me, it's not even about what side of the aisle you sit on. What it is about is, how do we take care of the American people? The people who have sent us here, the people who are struggling, people who don't know where their next meal is coming from, people who have no health care, people who have to go to work when we don't have to go to work because they drive the bus, or they're the people who deliver groceries or work in the grocery store or the pharmacy or someplace else. He could care less about these people. And so it is up to us to finally have our say. It is our time now to have our say. And that's when we go out and vote.
You are listening to Congresswoman MARCIA Fudge out of the Democrat out of Ohio, and this is special election coverage by the National Newspaper Publishers Association and Black Press USA. You will see us here every Tuesday night, including Tuesday night of the election. And speaking of Ohio and the great state, Walter White and Andrea Carter from the Cincinnati Herald, before our distinguished guest has to depart, we would be remiss if we didn't let the Ohio people talk to the Ohio Congresswoman.
Well, I think I'll ask the first question, Congresswoman Fudge. We're in Southwest Ohio, as you know, and there's been a lot of, let's say, effort into voter registration. I think one of the major things that we have to keep focus on, as Dr. Chavis said earlier, get away from the obstructionist games that are being played and stay focused on voting. And that's what we're trying to do down here. And as you know better than I, Southwest Ohio is traditionally pretty conservative.
Right.
I mean, it's just conservative. But the needle is moving. People are getting it. Communication. We just have to keep talking and talk until the 1 hour after the election. We have to keep talking to everyone about getting out to vote and talk about the clear and present danger of this current administration.
You have to keep saying to them, it's just like right now, people in my district, and I'm sure a place where there's a pocket of Black people, we're getting these robocalls now saying that if you vote by mail, we're going to notify the local authorities, so that if you have a traffic ticket, if you have a warrant for you, we're going to make sure that they get that information. We're also going to make sure any debt, any creditors you have, we're going to make sure that they get your information, because that's what happens when you vote by mail. It is not safe, and things that are not good can happen to you. We are getting those robocalls in our Black neighborhoods right now. We're also the target of all of the Russian and Iranian and Chinese interference. It is all about either depressing the Black vote or making the Black vote feel like it is too dangerous for me to go out. It is happening every day. We get intelligence reports that are proving that we are the people who are attacked most. We're the people who they spend most money on. Just give you this one number. Before George Floyd was killed, I think that the president's social media was at about $250,000 that addressed criminal justice reform at all. It's over 7 million now. Just talking about criminal justice reform. Everything is focused at how do we siphon off a little bit of the Black vote. Yet we as Black people don't realize the power we have to make this election what we want it to be. So I'm hoping that your papers are going to keep saying to people, your vote does matter. This is how you go about voting. It's safe to do.
Congresswoman, we had an incident the other day where a local candidate of a local race made charges against the GOP for race-based language in a mailer, and they were using eeny, meeny, miny, mo in the mailer. What would you tell the community, well, the country tonight about how do we avoid or how do we don't take the bait of when they use coded language to discourage voting or supporting a Black candidate?
You know, I used to give a speech titled, "The More Things Change, the More They Stay the Same." Whenever they feel like they can't get to us or beat us, they go back to race. They pull the race card every time. So what we need to say to people is if they want to take us back to a place that they thought was when America was great, we need to do what we did then. We need to go out, if it takes a march, if it takes a protest. But what we need to do right now is protest at the polling place. We cannot be deterred by the things going on around us. I saw that eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Because Alicia Reese is a friend and somebody who I've been supporting. And I saw it. But it's no different than what the president says every day. He's saying to people that the suburbs are going to be destroyed because Black people are going to come into the suburbs, that women are going to be raped, that people are going to be robbed just because Black people come into the suburbs. It is the same hue and cry that we have heard all our lives. The unfortunate thing is young people don't get it because they've not heard it. They don't know it the way we know it. And so they think, oh, what's racist about that? They don't even hear the dogmas. So we have to make them aware of what is happening in this country today. It is everywhere.
Also, I have to point out, aren't there more Blacks living in the suburbs now than they were even 20 years ago? So his argument about what's going to happen in the suburbs is really a moot point because we're already there and voting in
Except
the
that he's not smart enough to understand that.
suburbs.
He still thinks it's a bunch of white women taking care of kids and staying home all day. Those days have been long gone. But I mean, if I live in the suburbs, but my suburb happens to be 95% Black, but I still live in the suburbs. So people live in the suburbs everywhere, and they are coming out in huge numbers because they know he's a nutcase. I mean, he's a relic of the past.
Well, I have one more question for you. What about the silent majority from the people that were not hearing? The voters, Black and white, who are not speaking out, who are not protesting, who aren't marching, and they're not saying anything, but they're hearing everything. What do we do about that? How should we gauge what their reaction is?
The only good thing I can say right now is that 97% of the people in this country who are going to vote already know who they're voting for. So we have that 3%, that silent majority you're talking about. And I'm just going to tell you, I just assume that they're going to vote for Trump because if they weren't, they would say something. Most of them are afraid. You know, they don't want to say to you that I'm going to vote for this bigot, that I'm going to vote for this racist, that I'm going to vote for this person who is destroying the very fabric of this nation, who is tearing it apart at its seam. a person that doesn't believe in democracy. Because look at what happened 4 years ago. I'm one of the few people that said to the media after the election, this was not about Hillary Clinton. This was about race. This was a cultural war. The president was able to tap into the hate that has been building up in certain groups of people for many, many years. They just didn't know how to express it. And so what they see in him is that he hates the same people they hate, that they think we have gotten too much and gone too far, that immigrants shouldn't be here. And so those same people, look at it this way. The rich people are going to vote for him because he keeps giving them tax breaks they don't need. The poor people are going to keep voting for him, those who did, because they believe people like you and me have gotten too far ahead of them and that we're not deserving of our place. Not that we have not worked hard, not that we have not gotten good educations or gotten good jobs, but we are not deserving. And so there are always going to be certain people who are going to support him no matter what. It's the others, the ones you're talking about now, that frighten me. Because if you don't know at this point who you are going to vote for, the odds are you are going to vote for Donald Trump.
Congresswoman, I want to read you a quote that you probably heard already. This afternoon, the Biden campaign released a video from Michelle Obama, the former First Lady. And to your point, here's Michelle Obama. She says, I want everyone who is still undecided to think about all those folks like me and my ancestors. The millions of folks who look like me and fought and died and toiled as slaves and soldiers and laborers to help build this country. Racism, fear, division. These are powerful weapons and they can destroy this nation if we do not deal with them head on. Your response to the former First Lady, the very, very popular former First Lady.
She's absolutely right. But the problem is this. We don't teach Black history in our schools. We don't teach Black history in our homes. And so young people, that group that we really need, that 18 to 30-year-old, 35-year-old, they have no idea of what we've gone through. So they don't want to hear about the ancestors. What they want to hear is, what is voting going to do for me? How is it going to change my life or make my life better? They don't have a sense of community they don't have that same sense of community and neighborhood that we grew up with because we had to have it. And so I think that we have to find a better and different way. Now, I think she's absolutely right. She's talking to people who understand, but there's so many who do not. And they don't believe that they owe anything to their ancestors. Now, it bothers me greatly, but there's so much truth to it. I just hope that people will listen to what she says, because people really do very much like the former First Lady. They respect her. She's very, very smart. She has her hand on the pulse of so many things that are going on in this country. And I hope they will listen. But how many of them watch television? How many of them, they do social media, but not the way that we would think they would. So we've got a problem within our community as to how we rally young people, because all they think about is what's going to happen to me, and is it going to happen right now?
Yeah, and Congresswoman, before we let you go, I just want you to, again, Dr. Chavis made a point of saying not to take our eyes off the prize, not for people to take their eyes off the end goal here. Want you to tell our viewers, tell Black America, what should they be focused on right now?
Let me just say a few things. One is I hear so often that all of us are the same. We are not the same. I want to be so clear about it. If somebody besides me were sitting in this seat that didn't look like me, they would not be fighting for better schools for our children, because they would be sending their kids to private schools or getting the government money to send them to religious schools. They would not be fighting for SNAP and WIC and HBCU. They would not be fighting for safety and security in our neighborhoods, even from our own police who are there to protect us. We are not the same. And so they need to first realize there is a choice. And if they decide not to vote, they're also making a choice. They're choosing the other person, because if they decide not to vote for one of us, they're voting for the other person. And secondly, they need to understand that politics in some way, shape, or form affects every single thing in their life. what kind of school their kids go to, whether their parents or grandparents get their Medicaid or Medicare or Social Security, whether the food they eat is safe to eat, whether their streets are paved, whether they have police or fire. They do not understand that it affects almost every single aspect of their lives. And if we cannot get to a place where we will speak up for ourselves, nobody will speak for us. And so they need to understand that it's not always about you. It is about us. It is about our community. It's about our children, our parents and grandparents. And I think that people have to understand that. And lastly, I would say that you hear all the time that this is the most significant election of our lifetime. This one is. Because if we do not, I have watched them strip away resources for public education. I have watched them try to do away with things like health care for all, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, all of the things that help people in need. We are not a business. We do not say, if you can't make it, only the strongest survive. No, we are a government. And I think that we should be judged by how we treat those at the dawn of life and those at its sunset. We have to do what people send us to Washington to do. So all I can say to people is, if you choose not to vote, then you have decided to live in a country that cares nothing about you.
Yeah, and before you go, Representative Fudge, I have to go down to Florida and let our astute publisher ask a question of you, because otherwise he won't let me back in that great state.
That is so true, Congresswoman. You know, I applaud you for everything that you're doing, and from where I sit, yes, we all are different. But when they look at us, they put us in one frame, one category. Now, when we begin to step outside of that box that they have placed us in, we determine where the difference is now being placed. I wanted to digress, if I can. Jeffrey Boney, you were diagnosed and endured COVID. So I took it personal when you asked the Congresswoman that question. You know, I dare not say that Trump has the wherewithal to deal with COVID as you did. So the question is, was it really happening? That's just that. I don't want to spend all my time dealing with the facade of this man allegedly has COVID. What bothers me, the fact, as my daddy say, who is the more fool? The fool or one who follows the fool? So my position is, not only do we need to rid ourselves of the fool, but all those who follow the fool. And Congresswoman, what I'd like to ask you is, I was out passing out signs, putting yard signs out, and I ran into a lot of folk who said to me that they were afraid to put the signs out. Now, so that took me back to a biblical point that says, what good is it to have a lamp and you put it under a bushel? How do we begin to get those who are afraid to put the sign out, if you will, or just to voice their opinion and their concern about other people? How do we get that message out?
You know, that's a hard one, but let me go to church with you for a minute.
Thank you.
I want you to take a look at Samuel. If you remember, when God sent Samuel to find Saul to make him king, Saul was hiding because he knew he should never have had the position of king. Saul was the people's choice because they liked what Saul said. They liked how Saul looked. He was a person very much like the president we have now. But Saul was not God's choice. David was God's choice. And so when Saul so screwed up everything around him and everything God gave him, they finally decided to remove Saul and put David in his rightful place. And I say that to you because at some point, I do believe that this is spiritual warfare. Anytime you live in this country, in this day and age, and you're afraid to put a sign in your yard, or you're afraid to say to somebody what you think or what you believe, there is some evilness here somewhere. Now, I did not know that you had COVID, but I would say this. Anyone who believes that 211,000 people have made up the fact that they caught COVID and died, something is wrong in this country. And it goes beyond what makes sense. It is nonsensical. I don't know the answer, but what I do know is this. Until we can get people to have some faith and some belief in what they are doing or what they want to happen, we are a lost race of people. We really, really are. And so I'm just saying to people, we have to continue to fight this battle. Because I don't know, I've never been afraid, but I know that there are people who are, because they have no grounding, they have no core. I don't know I wish I knew the answer, but they need to understand whose we are, where we come from.
Yeah.
Well, Congressman Marcia Fudge, we certainly thank you so much for joining us tonight on this special election coverage by the National Newspaper Publicists Association. You're certainly welcome to join us at any time, as you well know, and keep up the great work. And we will be talking with you again soon.
Thank you. Florida and Ohio.
Yeah.
It's our time.
Get it done.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes. We'll get it done.
Absolutely.
Take
care.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
So Jeff Boney out in Houston, Texas. Jeff, what are the primary issues you see facing Texans, Black Texans particularly?
Well, I'm glad you asked. There are a couple of things that we're paying attention to down here. I know it was mentioned earlier about this, where relative to the boxes in Harris County. I know Dr. Chavis mentioned it, where in Harris County, Governor Abbott signed a proclamation here, basically not allowing individuals to drop off their absentee mail ballots at various locations across Harris County. And so he limited it to one place, which is the NRG arena where the Houston Texans play, and that is considered election headquarters. So people, wherever they are, and I don't know how big, how much you guys know how big Texas or Houston is, or the Houston area is, but we're talking about Harris County as a whole. All these individuals have to go to NRG Arena to drop off their mail ballots, which is completely unfair. And there are a lot of individuals who have filed suit, but it's kind of one of those too little, too late things. A couple of other things going on in Texas is this is the first year in decades where we in the Texas won't be doing straight ticket voting. I don't know. There's only a few states that do straight ticket voting, which is kind of one push voting. But this is the first time in decades that voters won't be able to make their choice in each specific race. And these ballots are long, and many believe this is going to lead to longer lines and possible undervoting. Back in 2017 is when Governor Greg Abbott signed this into law and ended that practice. And this is the first year, this 2020 presidential contest, that goes into effect. So you got many organizations, many activists, especially Democratic ones, who sued to have it reinstated, particularly because of the long lines that happened in Texas during Super Tuesday. So last month, there's a federal judge who blocked the state from allowing the new law to go into effect, talking about they needed extra time to fill out their ballots, leading to longer lines, polling places, of course, COVID-19. But last week, the higher court, the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals panel ruled that the district judge waited just too long to act on the law. So basically, this is going to impact a lot of voters, particularly because 2/3 of Texas voters used the straight ticket option, and the majority of those voters were Democrats, and they helped turn Harris County and Fort Bend County blue, all blue. And I don't know if you guys remember the 19 Black female judges.
Mhm.
Yes.
All the Black girls
Yes.
Magic who won all their races in Harris County. That came as a result of straight ticket voting, and a majority of those not only were Democrat, but they were Black voters. And so that's going to be a huge thing to look out for. And then with this decision by the governor to stricken the 11 additional locations for absentee drop-offs, that's going to be a huge thing. And the only other thing that I want to mention is this race for the United States Senate. Of course, last time we had Beto O'Rourke that was going against Ted Cruz, and he put up a valiant fight and came close to making this a flip of the U.S. Senate, but that did not happen. But now you have a race between John Cornyn, who is a huge Trump supporter, as we know, and MJ Hagar. And basically, she is a former military person. She has the support of many individuals outside. She just raised $13.5 million in 3 months. And in a new Quinnipiac University poll, Cornyn is only have a single-digit lead, which is different from the huge leads and wins that he's had in the past, basically coasting the victory with double-digit leads over his opponents. So the response to COVID-19 here in Texas, particularly by the governor, Greg Abbott, and because of Trump, and the fact that he's tied to them, could play a major factor in possibly flipping the Senate in a way here in Texas that could, actually flip Texas and make it overall blue. And of course, we need, that particular, the Democrats need that particular seat to flip in order to make a difference, of course, when it comes to any decision that the Senate makes.
Well, you can say we in the sense that you are a Democratic councilman yourself. So, Walter White, I want to go back to Ohio because Representative Fudge of Ohio did mention several things there that she talked about. And starting with you, Walter, and the panel, everybody can weigh in on this. What do you take from what we heard from the Congresswoman tonight?
Well, one of the first things I took after she said it, and I guess I was going to ask the question, but I thought maybe we can champion amongst ourselves and get the answers. When she talked about the robocalls, she talked about things that we need to be echoing out to the community. What are the list of things that the other party is doing to try to frighten African Americans and minorities from voting? We can talk about that. I think everybody in this room, right? We're in the room. Everybody in this room can champion up our digital platforms. They can champion up the front of our newspapers. We can champion up our websites, social media, and talk about, hey, if you get such and such call, ignore it. If you get such and such letter, ignore it. Because what they're doing is playing with people's psyche, especially people who may not be as vested in the political realm as we are, or the great councilman right there, Mr. Great Councilman, my friend from Texas. So, I think here in Southwest Ohio, and then I'm going to let Andrea add on, this is my biggest concern. In a place like Cincinnati, we can champion. Bobby, you know that. In a place like Dayton, we can champion. I worry about the middle towns with a lot of Black population. I worry about the Canton, Ohio's with a lot of Black population. I worry about the Hamilton, Ohio with a lot of Black population. Are we, for some reason, missing communicating to them about all of this stuff? Because the adversaries are shrewd. They know where to put those calls. Now, I have just added a phone line, an in-home phone line, because of my poor reception with, I'm not going to name the company, but I've gotten 15 calls. And it dawned on me, 2 of those calls was that the line just been open 2 weeks. And I'm like, where are these calls coming from? So I think what we have to do, and if there's a way we can get back to the congressman or we can get back to somebody and actually get all the dog whistles they're putting out there and publish them and tell people, that goes a long way to open up people's minds to what's being done to them. Because right now, they don't know. They really don't know, especially in the smaller towns. They don't know. I don't know what the voter registration looks like in Middletown. Andrea, maybe you do, but I cannot think it could be as robust as Cincinnati, or as robust as Houston, or as robust as Florida. And I think we can't lose those people. We have to make sure their minds are not crowded out, so they understand, go vote. Don't listen to this stuff.
Well, I know that in the rural areas, the smaller spots, people are either leaning toward Trump or they're leaning toward Biden. But I think also you have to say, why are they working so hard to oppose our vote? That's because their fear is that much bigger. I think the fact that what we saw, I was trying not to name Alicia's name, but what we saw with the Black candidate here for a local race, the polling, they just told me that the polling in her race put a fear in the GOP a lot greater than they ever anticipated, because normally you see that stunt pulled later in the race, not earlier in the race. The fact that we're seeing a lot of work now, they are so frightened by the outcome. And on top of that, this is the first day of early voting, and there were 1,100 people in line voting in Hamilton County before 10 a.m. People are upset. People are afraid. People are appalled by the actions that have been taken, not just by the president, but by their local politicians who are not calling out the higher ups to do their job effectively in representing us on the national level. In the past, when we've had Reagan and Bush and other Republican representatives, there was always someone in the back calling them out on their stuff. This is the first president where everyone has not been doing their job. And I think that has frightened so many people now, and they're tired of it, and they want someone to come back, put someone in who's going to do the job effectively and look out for them, and then maybe move on. And I think that's what's going on right now. I think even with all the silly stuff going on, I think people fear the unknown of fear what this president could do if he stays in office, and fear if he doesn't stay in office, what may happen. So I think both that driving force is directing both sides to go to the polls. Even third-party voting, I think, might be up, but we haven't heard a strong third-party candidate to help counter what has been going on. And I think that might be something to look into going forward. A third party might help offset what we've seen so far with this administration.
Well, it's interesting you say a third party, because part of Michelle Obama's video today, her speech, she talked about, and it was a loose reference to Kanye West, not to be distracted by a third party. But that, having said that, Bobby Henry, WESTSIDE Gazette, how is it possible? And it's probably a question for Jeff Boney of the Houston Forward Times as well. How is it possible for someone to still be undecided with everything that's happening today?
Okay, Stacey, we attempted to bring in a different perspective. Voting is just not registering folk to vote and filling in that little bubble. It's you got to before the vote, you got to during the vote, you got to after the vote. So what we have been trying to educate folk on is the voter protection side of voting. There's a lot of stealing going on, not only from the Russians, but from people right in within the United States. So with different organizations and different people, like a Benny Smith out of Memphis, Tennessee, who is the supervisor, a commissioner. And Benny was able to explain to the listening audience and the viewers how an election could be stolen. So what he did was use technology to show how this could be done. And then with other people like Emily Levy from California to come out and explain voter protection, how you can use, how names were used to take people off the roll. All of this disenfranchisement and this stealing of the voting process. But we have to educate our folk to that. We concentrate on trying to register the voters. If the voters are not registered now, we might want to ask the question, are they really going to get registered to vote? So now we got to deal with those who are registered to vote. Let's make sure that their votes are counted. There are things that we can do as voters. I didn't know of something that was called a poll tape. At the end of every election, at every precinct, they have to place a poll tape up there that says how many people came in, how many people voted, who voted for who. And we have the right as citizens to come out and take pictures of that and collect that data and use that data to our advantage. So we are trying, a group of us here in Broward County, one of the strongholds of the Democratic Party here in the state of Florida, trying to educate people on voter protection, not only register to vote, but what to do when you're voting and what to do after the vote. There is a lot of work to be done, and we can't just stop and say register to vote. We got to go a little deeper. Now, Stacey, what was that question you asked me? What was that question, Stacey?
Bobby, you know, there's a game show that kind of puts you to the side after you, you know, your time is up. So I'm going to go to Jeff Boney now. I'm going to act like I'm in that game show.
That's quite all right. I don't mind. I'll yield my time to Mr. Boney.
Hey, I thoroughly enjoyed your dissertation, Bobby.
Thank you.
I really did. But let me just, in answering the question, let's be clear, you know, and let's just deal with the elephant in the room here. There are a lot of people on the left, and there are a lot of people on the right who are disenchanted with their respective parties. There are a lot of people that are disappointed. They've been sold a bag of goods that, hey, if you elect a Republican president, and if you give us control of the House and the Senate, then we're going to do everything it is that we need to do to ensure X, Y, Z. And it doesn't happen. The same thing on the Democratic side. You have when President Obama was elected, he had the House and the Senate, and there were so many issues that you know, had been fought for and asked for on respective things, particularly African Americans, and none of those things really were addressed. Everyone else got their needs addressed. You know, you had same-sex marriage as an issue. You had, of course, the issue with the immigration reform and various things like that. And all of those needs were addressed. But when you ask, you know, African Americans under the Obama administration, and when they had both the House and the Senate and had the power to do any and everything that they could do, what actually happened? And so you got a lot of disenchanted people.
Yeah, and so we don't take commercial breaks here, but we do take time to acknowledge some of our loyal viewers. David Youngblood, I apologize for not getting your question in to the representative when she was on, but thank you so much for always supporting us. Annette Phillips, the same thing, and it's great to always have our publishers. Hiram Jackson out of Michigan, another battleground state. The great publisher out there is watching. He says, "Great job, team." #Black Press. And from the Washington Informer, Denise Rolock Barnes, she says, the Black Press is the watchdog of the Black vote. Having said that, what Denise has said, your response, Walter, Jeff, Bobby, your response to Denise Rolock Barnes saying that the Black Press is the watchdog of the Black vote.
You know, I like to say right away, she's absolutely right. I like to say, to piggyback on my great publisher from Florida, even though he's a Q.
Don't get him started, Walter.
I want to say this. I remember Obama's second election, as we all do. And I remember being at the Board of Elections in Cincinnati, just walking around. And I remember a young lady walking up the street because she had gotten that information we've been talking about here that was shared. And she said, let them try and stop me from voting. And she went in there and she voted. Somebody gave the information, Bobby. Somebody gave the information, Jeffrey, Andrea, so she would know that you're not going to tell me the sky is green today so you can't vote. Because it's not a complicated set of conversations going on why they're telling people they can't vote. But if you don't know, you don't know. We have to keep putting the message out there. That's why I want to get my hands on those dog whistles. That's why I want them published. And that's why I want them in every segment of our infrastructure, our construct, so we can share it with our young people, our middle-aged people, our older people, no matter, so they can vote and no one can stop them with a silly statement.
If I could, let me jump in here for a moment. I'm back up. Jeffrey, you were saying something about us being disenfranchised by a system. Well, let me tell you something. Here and I'm gonna speak. I'm gonna say it. Here in Broward County, we have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris' office about 4 blocks from me. Okay, there was a boatload of signs that come into their office. I mean, by the pallets. I called to get some of those signs. I was denied, but I called again. I got a little bit of feedback. I called my congressman office. I called my 2 state representatives that just happened to be black. And I told them that I wanted 500 signs. I didn't want 50. I didn't want 100. I wanted 500 because I was not seeing any representation of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris throughout my community. I was told by my black elected officials that I couldn't get 500. I could give you 50. I couldn't give you 50. Maybe I can get you 100. So Jeffrey, sometimes we are our own worst enemies. That's why I'm not telling anybody to vote strictly Democratic down the ticket. I'm telling them to vote for those who have your interests at heart and have others there. Don't just give it. It's a brand new game. We have allowed those same mindsets to stay in office, and they continue to do the same thing that they're doing. Another case in point, in our sheriff election here, we got a sitting black sheriff. It doesn't matter that he was appointed by our governor. Yeah, DeSantis appointed him, but he flipped the script. Now, when he was up for the primary election and he won, the 2 black candidates that ran against him have now opposed him and are standing on the side with a Republican guy running for sheriff, white guy with the last name of Clark. Here in Broward County, the last name of Clark, as it pertains to sheriffs, has a very negative meaning. The last lynching we had, the sheriff whose last name was Clark was at the lynching. So you got these 2 Negroes who got beat by this one black man who have now decided to oppose him by standing over with a white Republican sheriff who's running for sheriff with the last name of Clark. And you ask me, or you said, yes, but we are our own worst enemies. And now is not the time for us to jump ship, for some personal vendettas. Now,
Bobby, I want Jeff to be able to restate his point, but I wanted to say this too before you do that, Jeff. You mentioned something. I want to go back to what you said about Barack Obama. Oftentimes, especially in black households, there's always a time to speak and a time to be quiet, right? Is this a time? When was the time? And when is the time to bring out what you were bringing out? Because I've heard in different forms what you were saying about President Obama not taking care of the issues in the black community. And some people believe that helped give rise to this administration that we are seeing now. Can you go more into that? And of course, restate your point.
Well, I just simply wanted to say that there's disenchanted people on both sides, both Republicans and Democrats. And so if anyone is undecided, it's only because they don't want to play the lesser of 2 evils role. They don't want to vote the lesser of 2 evils. They want someone that they can vote and believe in. We keep emphasizing vote, vote, vote. But then it's like, okay, if you don't have an option to vote for that you feel honors your convictions, or you don't believe is going to meet the needs that you have as a person, as a family, as a community, then why vote for those individuals? So I can completely understand why people could be in that particular place and not feel guilt tripped to do so. Like, oh, if you don't vote Republican, then you're against XYZ, or if you don't vote Democrat, then you are for or against XYZ. I think that we have to respect people's convictions and their beliefs, and we have to do a better job of reaching out to them and giving them a reason to vote for us. And then once we're voted into office, follow through on what it is that we say that we're going to do. Don't promise to do something and underdeliver. People are tired of that. And so that's what I think we're seeing, particularly even in the African American community. There are a lot of African Americans that are disappointed that they are still being killed by police. That they're still facing a wealth gap that is triple that of whites, that they're still having issues with affordable housing. So there are so many things that I think that both parties should do to reach the African American community. But as it relates to President Obama, I'm not going to lay all of the blame on President Obama, because there were presidents before him, and sadly, there is a president after him that we have in the White House at this point. But whatever the case may be, we keep look at all of this platinum plan for Black America and this plan for Black. Everybody's got a plan. Bloomberg had a plan, the Black Wall Street plan for Black. I mean, so everybody's pandering to African Americans, but who's actually going to ensure that Black people are going to get the things that they not only need, but they truly deserve after putting in all of the sweat equity over all of these centuries here in this country to help build this country? We need reparations. We need so much more in order to ensure that we have a solid foundation for our future.
Yeah, Jeffrey,
Yeah, in
we
fact,
we need to stand up for ourselves, man. You know, if we don't, if we continue to bend over, then they're gonna walk on us all the way. So we need to stand up for ourselves. When are we gonna do that? When are we gonna tell?
I just like to interject one thing here, and I agree with you, Jeffrey, on certain points. But I think we need to also recognize you need to vote, because the general election is not the only thing going on. And down ballot, especially in our county, is very important, okay? And there are people who need to be voted out and people who need to be voted in. So you can't get discouraged at the top of the ticket. You can't let the top of the ticket control your orbit, because there's probably going to be about 40 other people on our ballot. And I'm guessing in a place like Houston, you might have 80 other people on the ballot. We have to get out and vote. If you choose not to vote for the president, fine. But don't forget where your concrete is laid, where your streets are paved, where your kids go to school. Don't forget the core of your life, because at the end of the day, all politics are local.
Well,
I think also, I want to say just this, that voting, I equate voting to freedom of speech. I mean, you need to speak up and speak out. What more powerful way to speak up and vote and speak out how you feel than voting? And I think that's the one thing that we tend to forget, that is a freedom of speech that we can express very easily, standing in line, go, check that ballot and keep on going. I think people tend to forget that. They see this happening and that happening, and they forget the first freedom of speech, which is voting.
Well, the president wants to take away the freedom of the press, so we have to think about that. But before we have to close, I want everybody to respond to this, and I'm sure Bobby will have some fun with this. There's been a lot of discussion across the media surrounding whether or not the president will vacate the office should he lose the election. I mean, he has not just hinted, he's made it clear that he's not going anywhere. Can we get you guys to weigh in on that? We've had Congress people on our program who said that there are laws, but since when does the man named Trump follows laws? Jeffrey mentioned his lack of paying taxes. Your response, what do you expect? If this is, as of right now, the polls say it's a landslide. If it continues that way, will he vacate?
Yes, because I think at the end of the day, he'll be forced to, because there'll be enough people who at the end of the day believe in the rule of law will force him to vacate. And on top of that, once Biden takes the oath of office, if he does win, whoever wins the presidency, if it's a new president, once he takes the oath of office at midnight, he can order his removal. So, I mean, that can occur. It would be ugly. It'll be a PR nightmare. But at the end of the day, when he's no longer president, he has to leave.
What hasn't been ugly during these
A
administration?
nice ugly, a very nice ugly.
Walter, you wanted to weigh in on that question?
Well, you know what? I'm going to just go with Joe Biden. He looked straight into the camera at each and every one of us, and he said, whether I lose or win, that position will be vacated one way or the other. So I'm not even concerned about that. I'm not losing any sleep about that because and by the way, it's at 12 noon, right, when they turn over power, right, at the inauguration. I've been to
Well,
one, so
but
I
actually,
think it's at 12 noon.
if you remember
So,
when Obama first won, he took the oath of office at midnight. Then
well,
they
I'm
did
just
the
saying.
ceremony at noon.
I'm
So
just saying. Let
there's a
him
way
sit there
around
on the
that.
steps of the White House with his lollipop so
Oh
they
yeah.
can just pull up and push him on down the road.
Why do you think he's gonna have a lollipop?
Well, you know,
Well, listen, serious question. Denise Rolock Barnes asked, and I'll start with Jeffrey since we didn't get Jeffrey on this go around. How does Kamala Harris on the ticket make a difference for Black voters?
I think she makes a huge difference. Having the potentially the first woman vice president, and the fact that she not only checks so many boxes. I mean, she's an HBCU alum. She's an AKA, so a member of the Divine Nine. She brings so much to the table. She's a former prosecutor, and so she has a lot of experience. She's come across as an excellent debater and senatorial representative. So I think that she actually adds a lot of value to the ticket, and I think that it's excited a lot of individuals, especially those that can relate to her upbringing, being me going to an HBCU and many of us going to HBCUs, as well as me being a member of the Divine Nine.
Yeah, and just so our viewers will know, we are a little over time. We'll be wrapping up, but we wanted to get an answer to this question, Andrea. The question posed by our publisher at the Washington Informer: how does Kamala Harris make a difference on this ticket?
I think she's the best representative of what a professional, powerful woman looks like. As my sorority sister, yay. I think also she best represents someone who has worked hard for the betterment of people, who understands what's going on. And I think if you remember when Eric Holder was resigning, he had offered her his job, and she turned it down to work on behalf of California to stay on and to make sure things were running correctly. So I think she knows what her priority is. I think she knows what the people need. And I think she'll be the best example of what better way to get what the Black community needs on a national level than have someone as vice president.
And Walter, and the debate is tomorrow. The vice presidential debate is tomorrow night. But go ahead, Walter.
I was just going to say real quick, since everybody claiming Kamala Harris, she was a Kappa sweetheart before she was anything else. Okay, let's go straight to where she came from.
Oh boy, this
but
sounds like a partisan panel now.
Oh,
now, I had to throw that at Bobby. But I want to say, all I can say is now every young Black and colored woman of color in America one day know they could be president of America, because it's beginning now.
Okay, Bobby, I'm bracing myself.
No, it's all good. I'm not going to. Now, wasn't she the sister who was almost attacked on stage?
yes.
Okay, and she didn't even flinch.
No.
So that said to me that this sister can handle pressure, because anytime deranged white man jump up on stage and she didn't run, that means she can handle more than just that. Not only, I'm with you, Jeff, that she graduated from an HBCU, but she proudly states that. A lot of time we run from who we are, but she totally embraces that. Never once did she shy away from it. No matter how much people threw things at her, she did not deter. She stayed her course. And not only that, because of a diverse marriage, she's able to deal with a lot of stuff. So if you want to get right down to it, the sister is able to deal with America and all of its differences. Amen. So Amen. I think she brings a lot to the ticket. I like Joe Biden. But if the Lord should call Joe home a little earlier, we'll have a sister running this country. The other thing about Trump not leaving the White House, man, come on. Now, I've said this, and anytime you put a person in a corner who's not too sane and real weak, it might be real ugly, and it won't look so pretty on the history of the United States. of what may happen if that man should succumb to the pressures of everything that he has done and find no escape out. He might only see one way out, and that's at his own hands.
Yeah.
One man is not bigger than the United States of America.
Thank you.
No, but did you hear my last part? You didn't hear my last part, did you? Okay, when you put a man in a corner who think he knows and has everything and you take it away from him, you know, what happened in the Great Depression when all of these people started jumping out of windows? You know, there's a psychological depraved individual in the White House. So that's what I'm saying.
We have just a couple more questions before we let you guys go have a late dinner. Bobby, I know that speaks to you in your heart. So, you know, many people think about American history and the fact that voting has taken place throughout history. However, Black people have only been able to vote nationwide for a few decades now, not a couple of centuries. Is part of the problem Blacks face based upon the fact that young people are not aware of that history?
So I asked the question, you know, why aren't they aware of that history? I mean, if we have, you know, people who I call beneficiaries of the civil rights struggle, who came out and knew exactly what individuals who fought for the right to vote, who marched with Dr. King or various others, coming out of that scenario, we're talking about the 1960s. You know what I'm saying? So if from the 1960s to now, we haven't been able to effectively pass down from generation to generation the importance of voting, then we can't blame anybody but ourselves. We can't blame now as far as the obstructionism, as far as the roadblocks that have always been there with literacy tests, poll taxes, and you know all of the various other things up until now with voter suppression. That's one thing. But those are tactics to stop us from voting. But the importance of voting, knowing the sacrifices that were made, the individuals who lost their lives or were brutally beaten, thinking about Bloody Sunday, it shouldn't just be something that you read about during Black History Month. It shouldn't be something that we just hear about when there's an anniversary or commemoration. This needs to be just like with various other cultures, they drill down their history into their children and their grandchildren, and they ensure that they know what's going on. So I think that we owe it to our children, owe it to our grandchildren, owe it to our youth, our future, in order to ensure that they know what's going on. And it starts with our families, but then it has to, you know, we have to be there for one another because it takes a village to raise a child.
Well, Andrea, I want to start with you, and this is going to be our final question. We were just, you guys were extolling the virtues of Kamala Harris, but we know about some African Americans being disgruntled with her policies as a prosecutor, and a lot of African Americans being disgruntled with Joe Biden for his policies that really sent so many African American men in particular to prison. We hear Puff Daddy and other celebrities like that, Chris Rock and others, talk about ransoming the vote. Hold it. Don't vote for either one. Don't vote for Biden if he doesn't make certain promises. How much of their history, Andrea and the panel, do you think that some voters, some Black voters, will hold against them?
I think there'll be a small fraction who will, but I'm going to turn that question around and say, see how much they have grown since what has occurred in the past and what they're doing and saying now. I mean, think about Joe Biden. He accepted being vice president to a Black man and helping a Black man run the government. That shows a lot of strength because he could have gotten in there and then taken over and directed things a different way. It could have been handled differently. I think Kamala Harris has shown a sign of growth. She did her job. Some people don't like how she did her job as a prosecutor. But at the end of the day, what is she saying now? What is she doing now that shows that growth from California to on the national stage? And I think that's what you have to take into consideration of voting for them. What are they doing now that shows that they're beyond what happened in the past. And I think Joe Biden, if you think about it, of his career, he's done a lot, but what he said today in his speech today shows that he has taken time to discuss, brainstorm, and come out on a side of fighting for the soul of the nation. And I think that shows growth and great strength to call out his fellow Americans and say, you need to choose country over party. Do what is right as an American, not just as a party representative or a party delegate. And I think that's the reason why we need to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
And your fellow Cincinnati Herald, Walter White?
Well, I'm going to leave it with this thought. Where we are today is because of who fought the fight 100 years ago and before. So the children who don't know, and as a parent of grown young adults who got tired of me talking about it and who would basically tell me, stop talking about it, I did not stop. You just have to have courage, because there's one thing about raising children, raising a family. As a parent, you have to have courage. You have to let them know what they may not necessarily want to hear. That's how you get them to one day come to you and say, you know what? You had a decent point there, Dad or Mom. I know that there's probably not been enough of this conversation you all talked about to the young African-American males and females, but we do know there has been some, okay? And we, the children, I'm talking about me because I'm a little older. I'm not going to say how much older, but we, the children of the civil rights movement, you have to understand, we don't really know what went on in 1960. We were kids. We just saw it. Okay, you learn more about it now and understand it as an adult and how big it was. So you share that information and you let them know that, hey, you go to the polls because there were people who didn't get to go and they lost everything so you could go. And simple. You ain't got to fight them over it. You just got to share it with them.
So Bobby, you see, yes, Walter answered the previous question. He didn't answer the question posed there. He went back on me. So I'm counting on you to pull him. This rivalry y'all got is really intriguing. Tues and AKAs or whatever. So I'm looking for you down in Florida with all the gators and stuff to help this guy out the swamp.
That's that other 19, whatever. That's that
and I'm so glad that my fellow man Jeffrey Boney be backing me up at the end so he can clean this up. But a drowning man will accept help from anybody. And if we were to associate ourselves, us as a people, with drowning in a sea of despair, be it Joe Biden come along and throw us a life buoy, we'll take it to pull ourselves up and remove him from where he is. Now, I equate voting with working. And the Bible says, if you don't work, you don't eat. So if we can't convince our people that in order for them to eat, they got to work. So equating working with voting, if they don't vote, then they don't eat. And if you don't eat, you soon to die. So I'm one that want to be here for a while. I want to know what's on my plate. I don't want to just be a part of the menu. I want to make the menu. So I'm voting.
Bobby, before we go to Jeff, you bring in the Bible and all of that, right? So real briefly, I had the privilege of eating lunch with Jeff in Washington, D.C. one time.
Oh, wow.
Jeff and his good buddy, Jordan. Oh my gosh. Bobby, you would have not been proud to be at that dinner or lunch or whatever it was. So his friend there was saying a prayer. And he was saying a prayer, a heartfelt prayer, right? Praying for that meal and really thanking God for providing such a good meal at such an expensive restaurant. And so Don't worry, Karen Carter Richards, our great chair, was there to pick up the tab, though. But nonetheless, this prayer went on and on. And I just thought maybe he was having a moment. Then your brother Jeff did something I had never seen. You ever watch the show Blue Bloods, and they have the family dinner on Sundays. You don't interrupt the prayer. Well, Jeff not only interrupted the prayer, but he used some words I don't know that God would endorse.
During the prayer?
To stop the prayer. So I just want you to know that since you set him up to close this out, there's some things there you use in the Bible and stuff, and Jeff just trampled all over.
I tell you what, I love God with all my heart, but you have to know the dynamics between me and my good friend Justin Jordan, as to know that he was doing that on purpose and deliberately, and so he knew that how I would respond to that.
They caught me totally off guard.
That's why I interrupted his so-called heartfelt prayer.
I'm sitting there. I was stunned.
But hey,
I can only imagine.
I'm gonna get to your question. I'm gonna answer your question, that you started with, and I just wanted to say, as it relates to Kamala Harris, she was a prosecutor. That was her job. Her job was to do the job that she was paid to do. She was hired to do, be a prosecutor, based on the laws that were in place at that time. And so it's very, I think, a little difficult to hold someone accountable in a negative way for them doing their job, unless they were doing something illegal or if they were doing something against the law. And that was not the case. It was the fact that when you're a prosecutor, you're paid and hired to prosecute. That's what you're paid and hired to do. Now, granted, I believe that many of the laws that were put in place, i.e., when you talk about the crime bill that was instituted, and the 3 strikes rule, and mandatory minimum sentencing, and many of the things that have ravaged the African American community for decades, I think that those things, unfortunately, she had to prosecute based off of many of those laws. And I think that that's what we need to start talking about. And I know former President Clinton apologized for the crime bill, and I know many others have. But at the same time, you can't reverse the damage that has been done. So I think that right now we have to judge, her based off of the merits of what she's done, the overall body of work, not just that one aspect of who she was as a prosecutor and her doing her job. So I think that we as African Americans need to be fair, because we all have elements about us and aspects of our lives where we had to do a job based off of what the employer expected of us, or what the job title required. So I think that she did a great job as a prosecutor doing her job, and that's what we need to consider. And the fact that she's done a great job as a senator, and I believe she'll do a great job as Vice President of the United States of America.
Yeah,
if given the chance.
And lastly, and this is truly the last one, I see Norman sent this over. We also have to consider who benefits from the criticisms of Biden and Harris. Andrea shaking her head. Go ahead, Andrea.
Well, I mean, think about who's fussing the most about Biden and Harris. Yes, there have been a lot of negatives about past crime bills and things like that, but at the same time, who reaps the GOP? Well, I should say conservative thought reaps the benefits of us thinking negatively about Biden Harris than thinking positively. But then again, I don't vote against my interests. I vote for who's going to do the best job for me. And I think that's what it comes down to. If the more someone criticizes something, why? Turn it around. Take a look at why are they criticizing? Why is that person saying something against the people who obviously can do the job better than what we have right now? And I think that's what people need to take into consideration the most.
Well, and thank you everyone for watching tonight. We will be doing this every Tuesday night. In fact, next Tuesday at 8 o'clock, same time, same channel, we're going to have a panel just like this, and it's going to include Florida Democratic Representative Frederica Wilson, next Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Every Tuesday, we're going to do this and on election night. So you'll probably see some of these same faces on election night. We hope we will anyway, and going forward. Jeffrey Boney of the Houston Forward Times, one of my favorite newspapers. Bobby Henry of the Westside Gazette.
Thank you.
Walter White and Andrea Carter of the Cincinnati Herald. We thank you so much. And we special thanks to Ohio Congresswoman Marcia Fudge. Thank you all for watching. Keep up to date on the 2020 election right here with the National Newspaper Publishers Association and Black Press USA. Everybody have a great night. Stay safe and stay well.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.